We all want to feel better, but we also hate going to the doctor. This is why we cringe at that first whiff of hospital air, which I can only assume is made up of anesthesia and embalming fluid with a splash of influenza. So when somebody comes along and says, we can make you feel better without all that traditional medicine stuff, and you'll hardly know you were here, that is pretty enticing. You wrap that up with a strong cultural connection, you call it alternative medicine, and you've got yourself a winning combination. Plus, hey, it's totally cool to be able to wear a white lab coat without a degree. But are all alternative medicines created equal? For some reason, 10 to 15 million people per year turn to acupuncture. So is there anything to it? Skeptic comedian David C. Smalley is here to discuss.
Hey, Jordan. Yeah, man, acupuncture has been surprisingly controversial in some skeptic circles, mostly because of the cultural connections. So it can be a little touchy to criticize it without being accused of having ulterior motives. But I want everyone to know today we're specifically addressing the facts surrounding acupuncture, not talking about culture in any way.
What do you mean here?
Well, so in this case, it's the cultural connection to China. And to be fair, a lot of these alternative treatments claim to have some ancient Chinese connection.
Yeah, but usually that's not the case, right? It seems like they often mislead on that or they overstate things dramatically. That's very common with this alternative stuff.
Right. And it's really just, you think it's ancient, but then it's really just some lady named Pat who started flavoring bubbles in her garage in 1986, and now it's bottled at Whole Foods.
So where did acupuncture actually start?
Okay, so like most of this stuff, no one really knows. The claim is that it started in China approximately 3,000 years ago. But some scholars have reviewed the documents where it was mentioned in these earlier digs, and they determined that while similar words to needle were used, they were more accurately describing bloodletting. The ancient medical technique to basically let people bleed out to cure things like syphilis or women having an opinion. And for bloodletting, they used a large, sharp needle or big objects, like sometimes even sharpened stones. Oof. So this idea that we're going to get into as far as like the flowing of energy or chi from organs to the skin very well could have just been blood. And that was the idea of energy. That's kind of the idea behind breath or spritz or whatever. The Latin for air was spiritus. So people would talk about like your spiritus would leave the body when you would sneeze, which is why it was an idea. They thought that was your essence, like your breath was your essence. And that's where we get the word for spirit and ultimately soul. And so this could be very similar to that as far as blood being your energy, the lifeblood of someone. It's kind of along that same vein.
Right. Okay.
And when people
Took
talk
me a
about
second.
when people talk about the meridian lines in acupuncture, which we're going to get into, they call them highways or energy flows. They're very likely just blood vessels. So, but again, people even disagree on that.
I didn't realize that there was even debate on where it started. That makes sense, but also shakes this around even more.
Yeah, so one legend claims that a Chinese soldier had his leg wounded in battle, and then when he was stabbed in the shoulder, the leg pain went away.
Okay, well, I can certainly see how he might not be thinking about his leg pain at that particular moment. Like, hey, let me stab you in the shoulder. That's ridiculous when you recount it like that.
Yeah, I mean, apparently the legend goes that multiple soldiers claimed that this also happened to them, and that was the beginning of acupuncture. But again, people disagree on what actually started this, because when they look back historically, different things point to different things, and they'll say, well, I don't think they meant acupuncture. I think they meant acupuncture. And other people argue that A did and B didn't. So those are kind of the arguments. Another story goes that ear acupuncture was started by a Frenchman. And the idea there was that he believed that the human ear strongly resembles a curled up fetus in its mother's womb. And therefore, if you have leg pain, he would poke a needle into your ear where the leg would be on the fetus in your ear. And people started believing that it worked. Apparently, he convinced himself that he could cure his own leg pain by stabbing himself in certain parts of his ear. And that's the origin story of that piece. And people have tried to refine ear acupuncture over time, making it seem more scientific, having to do with neurology and sort of exploiting just how complicated the human body is, so that many of us just don't even know enough about biology to ask the right questions in order to fact check this stuff. But we do know that during the Ming Dynasty, from 1368 to 1644, the Great Compendium of Acupuncture and Moxibustion was published, which forms the basis of modern acupuncture. And in that, there are clear descriptions of the full set of 365 points on your body that represent openings to the channels through which needles could be inserted to modify the flow of energy, or qi in Chinese. And interestingly, there are now said to be over 2,000 acupuncture points on the human body. So the number has definitely grown over time, and things have been modernized. So
Yeah, did you know that if I punch you in the face and then kick you in the junk, your face will barely, you won't even really notice that it hurts. It's an ancient Chinese art. What is moxibustion? That sounds like burning something.
yeah, that's when they burn mugwort leaves over certain points, or acupuncture points, for magical essence flow or something. It's the same idea. They're just burning
Okay.
leaves and putting them on you as opposed to stabbing you and stuff.
Okay, so if they add moxibustion and increase the number of points, then the sessions are much longer. They can obviously charge more. There's some cupping in there and whatnot. So the story isn't really clear where modern acupuncture even started.
Right. And even cupping is, they kind of use acupuncture points for cupping
Yeah.
to know where to put the cups.
I've had it done. I was curious about it. It's just, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you notice a difference? Did you feel any better?
Oh, no. I mean, no. I've tried acupuncture. I've tried cupping. I've tried all this. I've tried a lot of this alternative stuff, and I've never noticed anything getting better in any way. But I'm also open to the idea that I, one, don't believe in it, and that's why, or two, I had a bad practitioner, sample size of one. This, I'm not doing science myself, but I'll try stuff like that, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay. It turns out there's nothing here for me. I know that we're off a little bit here, but I think I might have mentioned this on the show before, but I've had a foot massage from a Chinese doctor from Tibet, because my mother-in-law was like, oh, this will help. It helps me. So I went there, and she's like, oh, you must have leg pain. And I'm like, no. She's like, well, you have knee pain. I'm like, no. She's like, you have hip pain? I'm like, no. And she just was like, oh. And then she didn't talk for the rest of the session. And I was like, what made you think that? And she's like, oh, because these things I'm pushing on your feet, the reflexology, this, that, and the other thing. And I just thought, but you kind of just guessed a bunch of stuff that every guy who's 40, I'm 42 years old, every single guy my age has had an issue with this at one point or another, but currently no, and everything's fine.
She's like holding your pinky toe going, do you sometimes grunt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever sleep and then wake up suddenly? Yeah. Wow. Amazing. It's just, so I just was like, there was nothing to that. And then I looked up foot reflexology, and it turned out to be, well, actually let's just say it's another episode of Skeptical Sunday waiting to happen.
Absolutely. And I've only had somebody do cupping on me once, but it wasn't the cupping you had. It was my tailor. He said he had to do that to make the suit fit.
That's a different...
I don't know.
Okay.
But,
all right.
All right, look. So this is going to make more sense in a moment, but I want to say this. As far as where acupuncture actually started, the National Institute of Health, and I want everyone to just put a little note there for a moment when I say that, because I'm coming back to it. The National Institute of Health does have an article that says acupuncture is a 3,000-year-old Chinese practice. So I'll state that for the record. But
okay.
Regardless of the actual origins, even today, it has a pretty solid link to China and is pretty integrated into parts of the Chinese healthcare system. It's even taught at several Chinese medical universities, with the most common education route being 5 years studying for a bachelor's and then 3 for a master's and PhD, or students can just immediately sign up for a master's program and go for 7 years.
Is that just in China, or do we offer something like that here in the United States, Canada?
Yeah, so we offer it in the States, and we have since 1981. There's been a master's program in acupuncture. since then. In fact, the Maryland University of Integrative Health says that their Master of Acupuncture program was the first accredited master's degree program in acupuncture in the United States and continues to provide students with a comprehensive curriculum combining rigorous classroom teaching and a rich clinical experience, and that the program is designed for individuals who wish to start their own private practice.
So this sounds significantly more involved than some of the other practices that we've covered, like Reiki or crystal healing, because those don't usually have, there's not like a United States-based accredited school teaching those things.
Right.
What does the science actually say?
Okay, so this is where we start fights. And I'm clearly not a doctor, but I do have a built-in bullshit detector and I can read. So I'm going to share both sides of this debate with you and see where it leads. And I just want to say, I have some listeners of my show who love my skepticism, who love my debates, who love my arguments, but have written me and said, I'm actually an acupuncturist and I don't like the things you say about it, but I understand your skepticism. So I do want to share both sides of the debate and just kind of see where it leads. And I'm keeping those people in mind as I'm doing this today. So the National Library of Medicine is a branch of the National Institute of Health, which I've used as a credible source on a few of these episodes concerning medical issues. They have an article published in July 2014 called Acupuncture, Past, Present, and Future. And in it, they state, and I'm quoting, during the past 40 years, acupuncture is a therapeutic technique of Oriental medicine and has become more and more popular, evolving into one of the most utilized forms of complementary integrative medicine interventions in the United States, end quote. And then they almost immediately dive into cancer treatments, saying studies conducted on both humans and animals suggest that acupuncture may strengthen the immune system during chemotherapy and can reduce the side effects of nausea and vomiting.
So they're making a pretty bold claim in what seems to be a well-respected science journal.
Well, they go on to say, and I'm quoting, perhaps one of the most promising signs for the future of acupuncture in the United States is the non-discrimination in healthcare language of the Affordable Care Act, the ACA. And the language of the ACA prohibits discrimination against providers who deliver services that fall under the state-defined scope of practice. This ensures in most cases that health plans can no longer make it a requirement that acupuncture services be provided by a medical doctor, a stipulation that means that covered acupuncturists were required to have their acupuncture license and be an actual MD, but now they don't have to be certified or an actual MD.
Yikes. Okay, that can't be good. That opens it up to all kinds of grifting.
Well, but it goes on to say, I mean, it makes it cheaper and more accessible for people who want to access it. So they go on to say, furthermore, in states such as California, complementary and alternative medical interventions such as acupuncture are now considered essential health benefits.
All right, I'm waiting for the bombshell here, David. Are you trying to keep us in suspense?
No, I'm trying to not be murdered. So I'm giving a fair shake for the listener. It gets better. A 2010 study published by Brain Research and conducted by researchers at the University of York and Hull York Medical indicated that acupuncture has a very significant impact on particular neural structures. Their analysis showed that acupuncture helps deactivate the areas within the brain that are associated with processing pain. And if that's actually the case, that could be huge.
Well, is that the case?
I'll address that in a moment, but I'd like to offer a few more details from this article. So they make the very bold claim that a 2004 study conducted in Sydney, Australia, that focused on the point P6 as a point for treating post-operative nausea showed that those who received acupuncture treatments were 29% less likely to get sick and 28% less likely to feel nauseous. And it says acupuncture for pain management has changed so many people's lives in the past 40 years. The scientific research increasingly supports the use of acupuncture in the treatment of many conditions in addition to pain management. Increasingly, acupuncture practitioners are championing efforts to inform and educate medical professionals and the public on the widespread application and evidence base of acupuncture.
Yeah, the acupuncture specialists need to educate the medical professionals. Okay, look, no. Okay, keep going.
Well, they can turn to the very trusted source of the Chinese government if they're curious. The National Health Commission of the People's Republic of China released an announcement in 2018 titled Acupuncture Proves Its Point.
Nice. Chinese Communist Party coming in hot with the puns.
Their official government website says, and I'm quoting, China's ancient medical remedy of acupuncture is gaining global popularity after proving to be an effective treatment for illnesses and ailments that Western medicine still struggles to cure.
Okay, I think I see what's going on here.
Yep, power move. They also say not only is it commonly used to treat pain, nausea, and headaches, it's also applied in beauty clinics for conditions such as skin rejuvenation, stress release, and weight loss. In recent years, acupuncture has become the new healthy lifestyle buzz after developing a fan base among royals and celebrities, including Meghan Markle, movie star Matt Damon, and singers Sheryl Crow and Madonna.
So let me get this straight. The official Chinese Communist Party website is listing American celebrities as evidence that acupuncture actually works. This is peak China somehow.
Yeah. I mean, they clearly know what Americans value for sure.
Yeah, touche.
And yes, I provided the link in the show notes so they can read this themselves. They also claim, and I'm quoting, in 1993, an incident in the UK transformed the market and created a big demand for acupuncture among British patients. News spread that an acupuncturist in London's Chinatown had successfully cured several British patients of eczema. This condition causes the skin to become itchy, red, and cracked, and even today, there is no cure for it in Western medicine. So it's still kind of this, I guess they're kind of taking these pot shots at the idea of Western medicine, saying we've got it better than they do.
Right, of course. So now that you won't be murdered, I have questions. Is the National Institute of Health actually endorsing acupuncture?
Okay, no.
Good.
And that may sound bizarre based on what you've just heard, but there is a disclaimer link at the top of that page. And if you click it, here's what it says. Disclaimer. These resources are scientific literature databases offered to the public by the U.S. National Library of Medicine, or NLM. NLM is not a publisher, but rather collects, indexes, and archives scientific literature published by other organizations. The presence of any article, book, or document in these databases does not imply an endorsement of or concurrence with the contents by NLM, the National Institutes of Health, NIH, or the U.S. federal government.
Okay, so they should probably put that entire paragraph on the page at the top of these articles.
Agreed.
Come on.
They should also list the author and their credentials at the top of the page, because this article was not written by a doctor, but rather an MBA named Jason Jisun Hao, who just happens to be the, wait for it, chairman of the Acupuncture Committee.
Of course he is. So a guy who spent his life studying something / business of marketing something and works with the Chinese Communist Party went ahead and drafted a document that shows that this thing that happens to be valued by the Chinese Communist Party, that again, he's dedicated his life to / markets / makes a living selling, just happens to be this amazing cure-all that has amazing results you can't get anywhere else, especially in icky yucky America or the West. Color me surprised, David.
You nailed it.
So what's the basis of their claim on reducing pain when having cancer? I mean, that's, if that happens also, then that's amazing.
Okay, so the great thing about the National Library of Medicine is they do require contributors to cite their sources. And that's what I spent the vast majority of my time on this specific topic doing, is chasing down the citations that were listed in the specific papers. So for the claims on helping with cancer treatments, I followed those sources in the links, and it just says, oh, sorry, I got a quote here. It says, the results are mixed due to small sample sizes and design problems. And then another one says, in one review, acupuncture reduced cancer pain in some patients with various cancers, although the studies were small. And it also hints that it based its results on the questionnaire of the patients.
So they weren't hooking people up to MRIs or measuring pain receptors or anything like that.
Right. They basically just asked, how do you feel? But MRIs should definitely be done in these studies. In fact, I found one line that claimed they have. It says a 2010 study published by Brain Research and conducted by researchers at the University of York and the Hull York Medical indicated that acupuncture has a very significant impact on particular neural structures. Their analysis showed that acupuncture helps deactivate the areas within the brain that are associated with processing pain. But again, when you follow the source they cited, it shows that only 17 people were in that study. And it shows that they were imaged in a 3T MRI scanner. fMRI data sets were classified on the basis of psychophysical participants' reports of needling scores. And brain areas showing changes in what they call bold signal increases and decreases were identified. Now, that sounds important until you realize bold doesn't mean significant or important. It's an acronym for blood oxygen level dependent.
Okay. So I was like, well, that sounds important. Oh, it's an acronym.
Yeah.
So yeah, blood and oxygen levels may fluctuate if you are stabbing me. Got it.
Yeah, it may, perhaps, because a lot of that is the type of words they use as well. Differences were demonstrated in the pattern of activations and deactivations between groupings of scans. But then it goes on to admit the predominantly acute pain grouping was associated with a mixture of activations and deactivations. That's a very complicated way of saying for most of the people, we couldn't tell a difference.
Right.
Listen to how complicated. I want to read it. I want to say it one more time. I want to read this line. The predominantly acute pain grouping was associated with a mixture of activations and deactivations. They're saying that the vast majority of results, we couldn't tell any difference.
Right. So even if we don't have to trash the study and the sample size and the methodology and blah, 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 let's just say, let's just agree now it's technically a study. They don't have conclusive results anyway.
Well, and all you have to do is say the word may, right?
Right, sure.
So notice the language. They'll say things like, it may cause a drop in yada, yada, or seems to have an effect. And that'll be the title, right? Acupuncture seems to have an effect in chemotherapy nausea. But they're rarely definitive about any interpretation. So yes, it's a study. And yes, it may change something, but even that is a stretch.
Hey, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show podcast feed. There's a lot more just like this. You can find the Jordan Harbinger Show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to the show. What about the cancer treatment symptoms it supposedly helps with?
Okay, so another 2020 clinical trial to treat cancer pain showed that the combination of different acupuncture types were effective in reducing pain and use of pain medication. But again, the study was limited by a small sample size and a lack of a placebo group. And in this case, a short follow-up. And the big one that focused on chemo says some randomized clinical trials of acupuncture have shown promise in treating chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, which causes pain and muscle weakness from undergoing chemo. Notice how it says shown promise. And then they immediately say, but more evidence is needed to explore how acupuncture may relieve symptoms.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course they need more evidence, or any actual evidence at all, I might add.
Right. There's another contributor who published an article for the National Cancer Institute that said, and I'm quoting, 6 randomized clinical trials studied the use of acupuncture to prevent hot flashes in breast cancer survivors. These trials found that acupuncture was safe and decreased hot flashes. And that's the end of the quote. I mean, that these trials found that acupuncture was safe and decreased hot flashes. That sounds amazing. And at the very least, they didn't even make me chase down another study to fact check it, because the very next sentence is, it was not clear whether real acupuncture worked better than sham acupuncture.
Sham acupuncture? How is that different from non-sham acupuncture? I know I'm being a dick, but whatever.
Sham is obviously fake, Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Okay.
They describe it as poking the needles in for acupuncture, but for sham acupuncture, you're poking the needles in, but you're intentionally missing the meridians. So pokies without the magic as a control to see if magic pokies work better.
Okay.
And clearly they work about the same. That's weird.
Yeah, that's go figure. So what's the point of even putting it in a scientific journal if it's a coin flip?
Right. So that's like me saying, Jordan, I will be available to record a podcast with you tomorrow. And also, I may actually not be available tomorrow.
Schrodinger's podcast, both things at the same time. Yeah, it seems pointless. And did you find anything on their claim of acupuncture reducing the nausea or sickness? Because placebo can actually do that, at least.
Yeah, it can. And I know that placebo can help with pain and nausea and even vomiting. Because, the action with the belief can do something for endorphins and kind of controlling it. Like I think Seinfeld says it's weird how people may pee themselves in public, but the rectum seems to be socially aware. Like for whatever reason, you just don't, you never have to poop that bad until you're pulling your pants down in front of the toilet. It kind of just knows. So there is some sort of mental connection with some bodily functions.
Interesting
like that.
Metaphor you use there. Yeah.
But,
keeping it classy.
I'm quoting Seinfeld, so I don't believe he's a philosopher or medical doctor, but they did make the claim that acupuncture can reduce nausea from chemotherapy. And when I went to track down their cited source, their citation was actually quoting a website called acupuncturetoday.com. So I didn't even bother chasing that rabbit. It's more the same claims without scientific proof. So
do they ever describe in detail how it's supposed to? It's funny that that's the source, man. It's like source trustmebro.com says that this definitely works. Do they ever describe in detail how it's supposed to work?
So not in this actual article, surprisingly. It's kind of even though it's on this medical website and medical journal and it seems super, official with citations, it's really just a puff piece for acupuncture's reputation. But I did find some people who tried to medically or accurately or scientifically explain it. So Hopkins Medicine says traditional Chinese medicine practitioners believe the human body has more than 2,000 acupuncture points connected by pathways or meridians. Now, that's actually incorrect. Traditional Chinese medicine thought it was 365. Modern medicine says, or modern acupuncture says 2,000, but that's my one caveat to this quote. Then they say these pathways create an energy flow, qi, through the body that is responsible for overall health. Disruption of the energy flow can cause disease. By applying acupuncture to certain points, it is thought to improve the flow of qi, thereby improving health. And then they go on to warn that improper placement of the needle can cause pain during treatment, and needles must be sterilized to prevent infection. That's just more CYA for the website.
Love that. But so they're not endorsing it either, basically.
Well, that's where it gets interesting because they don't, but they seem to believe that the National Institute of Health has endorsed it, which is the other site I just quoted. So they have a line in their article that says, and I'm quoting, the National Institutes of Health studies have shown that acupuncture is an effective treatment alone or in combination with conventional therapies to treat the following. And then they include nausea caused by surgical anesthesia and cancer chemotherapy as part of their list. So
someone didn't read the disclaimer. That's what it sounds like to me. They didn't click that link.
And that is so scary.
Yeah. So this sounds like another example of people taking unnecessary risks with their health for something that doesn't seem to have any provable or evidence-based way to cure or even really treat anything other than maybe pain, maybe nausea, but also we're not sure.
Okay. So this is where it takes kind of a weird turn. You're exactly right. The Guardian published an article back in 2010 that said over the previous 45 years, 86 people have been killed by improperly placed needles.
I gotta hand it to the Chinese Communist Party and the acupuncture journals, though. They have managed to figure out how to make something out of what certainly sounds like nothing. It's like an information warfare propaganda puff piece. It's almost like the Chinese Communist Party is like, but have you tried Herbalife? The shakes are delicious, and I've lost 10 pounds. I'm just like a government straight up shilling for fake sham medicine.
Yeah, but did you ever have any idea that someone could die from acupuncture?
No, but it makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, look, and I'm not defending acupuncture or any sort of like fake medical stuff, but 45 years, 86 people. If you do the math on that, that's pretty damn rare. People dying from this. On the other hand,
but I thought it was literally zero. I thought it was literally zero.
I thought it was zero, and also, since it doesn't really do anything, that's 86 people too many. It's not like 86 people have died getting a heart stent where they would have definitely died otherwise, and it saved hundreds of thousands of people. This has saved 0 people, and 86 people have died. So, yeah, that's
right. So what shocked me about this, and I knew about acupuncture, I've addressed it before, I've talked to people before who did it. What I started to be shocked by is I just thought the worst part of acupuncture was
getting bilked out of your money.
Just no. I thought the worst was dealing with pain. It's just them poking you, with a bunch of needles all over you. One of my comedian friends just posted on Instagram. He just like put the camera up above his head, and you could see like a needle like in his hair, like still sticking out of his scalp. And I was like, dude, they're sticking, like there's not a whole lot of space in between your skin and your skull. Like, what are they stabbing back there? And they left it in. So
sure, yeah, you leave it in there for like 20, 30 minutes, I think sometimes.
No. When he left, he was home.
What? That seems completely unsafe, because you could knock that thing in your car, or you could,
that's what I'm saying. Ugh. He's home, and he's going, a couple hours ago, what the hell's going on? And pulls this
giant...
Did
they forget to take it out?
They forgot to take it out. Like they took a bunch out. He gets home and has one stuck in his hair.
I thought maybe they're like, hey, take this out in an hour. No, they just forgot it was in there.
They forgot it was in the, they probably put 50 in there or 100 in them.
When they're doing surgery on you and they're using those sponges and tools, they have the outline of the thing on the tray so that they don't leave something on or in you. And it sounds like maybe count the needles. Just look, that's one strategy. I'm no
one Mississippi,
but
2 Mississippi.
Yeah, looks like we put 30 on the guy. Maybe we should have 30 when we're done on the table. Just saying.
So that same document also says this. A review of patients who died soon after acupuncture found a history of punctured hearts and lungs.
What?
Damaged arteries and livers, nerve problems, shock, infection, and hemorrhage, largely caused by practitioners placing their needles incorrectly or failing to sterilize their equipment.
I'm going to pause you right there. Every place that you put a needle inside me for something that is not medicine is incorrect. So 100% of acupuncture needles are placed incorrectly. But failing to sterilize their equipment, that's what I thought people would have died from. Punctured livers, arteries, and hearts and lungs. We're going to talk about that in a second. I'm going to let you finish, but damn, that's horrible.
And these... Yeah, you're right. It's like someone said in court one time, it was like, oh, this was a robbery gone wrong. It's like, Has there ever been a robbery go right? Like, what are you talking about here?
Yeah, we got all the money and no one got hurt. I think that's what they meant. Oh, God.
Yeah. But there are places that you can stab yourself with these needles and not die from a puncture wound. And this sounds like one of the most painful, torturous ways to die. It's pretty terrifying. So many of the 86 patients that were between 26 and 82, they died after being treated by acupuncturists in China or Japan, but a handful of fatalities were also recorded in the United States, in Germany, and Australia. The most common cause of death was a condition called pneumothorax, where air finds its way in between the membranes that separates the lungs from the chest wall and causes the lungs to collapse.
Oh, gosh.
So a medical professor who studied the deaths said these reports were very likely just the tip of a larger iceberg. There are probably so many more people who went home later and died from something. It was probably listed as natural causes. There was no reason to do an autopsy, and no one even knew that they had gone, through acupuncture, 48 hours before.
That is horrifying. The needles, I didn't know, first of all, I didn't know the needles were that long. I thought we were talking about those little ones that end up in your hand. They can puncture organs. Here, I'm thinking these little tiny things that go in a couple skin layers deep, which is bad enough if we're talking about infection or whatever. I mean, that's just horrible.
No, this
sounds like a knitting needle going through you.
Yeah, this is gonna make you a little antsy. So it's pretty terrifying. So Science Alert posted a notice in 2019 saying an An acupuncturist in New Zealand has accidentally pierced a young woman's lungs
Oh,
after inserting needles in her shoulder region too deeply.
wait, in your Oh, that's
Yeah,
really
yeah. So
far.
I was thinking something in the chest that went through the ribs or right on the side. It was up in the shoulder.
Oh,
And it was a
man.
33-year-old patient. She was seeking treatment for an arm and wrist injury, which was causing pain on the top of her shoulders and a shortness of breath. So to treat her, the acupuncturist decided to place 2 needles in a nearby acupressure point known as gallbladder 21. And as the needles were going in, the young woman expressed pain. And then later she told the Health and Disability Commissioner that the insertions felt extremely deep.
I'm sorry. I know this
Both-
is terrible. I'm sorry.
Both needles were left in her for half an hour before they were then rotated and then moved.
Oh, my gosh.
And it was at that point that the patient felt a sudden onset of chest pain and a shortness of breath. And she told her acupuncturist, this part creeps me out. She told her acupuncturist she felt stuffy. And then she said, I'm having a strange and painful air sensation in her chest around both lungs.
Oh, my
The
God.
the acupuncturist sent the patient home
Of course, yeah.
and she told her, rest up and take it easy.
Yeah, have some water. Yeah. Ugh.
Later that night, the woman's husband ended up rushing her to the emergency room where they discovered both lungs were collapsed due to what they call topside puncture.
Oh,
And apparently the lungs are one of the most common areas to be punctured because they're often reached from the back as well.
oh my God. That makes me so queasy, dude.
I
to
know,
think
it's so weird. I
that a
know.
needle would go that far. Oh, can you even imagine that? You basically just paid someone to stab you and almost / actually kill you because of some shit you read in Reader's Digest or an Instagram post. Like, what a foolish gamble that is. What are actual doctors saying about acupuncture?
Well, and you talk about foolish gamble. That's if you actually have a medical issue. Some people go for cosmetic reasons. They think it'll make their skin prettier or to get rid of eczema or something like that. And then they end up going and dying with a
You're gonna look
punctured
great
lung
when
or
you're
heart.
embalmed.
Your skin's going to be beautiful.
It's gonna be very smooth. We're gonna staple your neck down. You'll look great. You'll look 10 years younger.
We're just going to take 2 acupuncture needles and just knit your flat skin back together. It's going to be great. Oh my God. So you asked what the doctors are saying. When you say doctor, so chiropractors call themselves doctors, PhDs call themselves doctors. There are some attorneys who even do it because of the doctorate involved in the education. So, I mean, a lot of people really don't want to be attacked or get involved with this debate. So, naturally it doesn't come up in your standard Google search for, like, you're not going to have a bunch of neurologists speaking out against, the horrors of acupuncture, mostly because it isn't seen as dangerous for the most part. At least statistically, like you said, it's pretty good numbers. It's not like it's an epidemic that we have to address and there's just, acupuncturists are just murdering people. Although we wouldn't really know, if someone was dying a couple of days later. It's a very slow and agonizing way to die. So I bet you there are tons of people who have died from this, and then just nobody just knows that they had a treatment. So
Sure. You're like, oh, that's weird. Her liver just exploded and she had this toxic septic shock in her body. Wow, that's weird. Oh, she must have got hit by something and not noticed. Actually, a needle punctured it and then got removed.
Yep.
Ew.
Yep, or something genetic, or
Yeah.
who knows, or just unknown natural causes or something like that. And that's the reason I did the whole disclaimer at the beginning, because I've just commented on videos before of people doing acupuncture, and I've been like, the science doesn't really support any positive results from acupuncture other than a placebo. And I was told in the comments to keep my whiteness out of her culture.
Jeez.
So if it can become like about race or culture or considered hate speech to say a scientific fact, you have to weigh the odds and just pick your battles. And so I don't see how a lot of doctors would benefit from putting statements out on the internet, going after something that they see as relatively harmless other than a waste of money. But privately, nearly all of them will tell you it's nonsense. I had a few conversations with doctors privately when I was writing this and putting the notes together. And of course, they asked me not to mention their names, but they were like, there's absolutely no real science to it. There's no support for the practice. But if it makes someone feel better, then maybe it's not all that bad as long as they're not getting their lungs deflated.
That's the common theme of a lot of these things, right? That we've debunked on Skeptical Sunday and even stuff we haven't touched yet. If the monster spray makes the kids sleep, then what's the harm and why is it your business, et cetera?
Right. And the skeptic is in the corner going, well, you taught the kid about the monster in the first damn place. You're the problem. You know, not to mention the conflict of interest when the monster spray company is also pushing ads about monsters in kids' videos on YouTube.
Sure.
You know, but I did find a few people who would publicly address it. You're aware of Dr. Stephen Novella.
Yeah, of course. It makes sense he would talk about this.
Yeah. So he's a Yale University neurologist. He's the author of The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And of course, he has a podcast by the same name. In a video for Tech Insider, he says, acupuncture is essentially an elaborate placebo. You get no effect out of the actual acupuncture itself. The clinical research clearly shows, after literally thousands of studies, that it doesn't matter where you stick the needles. It also doesn't matter if you stick the needles. You can randomly poke somebody with toothpicks, and some studies literally do that, and it's just as effective in doing all the things an acupuncturist is supposed to do. It's not science-based medicine.
So this is precisely what I figured. You're better off just buying some of the crystals people charge on the back porch during a full moon or whatever and laying those under your pillow, because at least the odds of you puncturing your lung or your heart with a frickin' amethyst are pretty close to zero.
Right. Yeah, you're spot on. So if you embrace both of those, I encourage you, go the crystal route.
Yeah.
I also came across Skeptic Doc. Her name is Dr. Harriet Hall, and she's a retired family physician and former Air Force flight surgeon who specifically writes about alternative medicine and what she calls quackery. And she gave a 40-minute talk on acupuncture for QED that's available on YouTube. And yes, I've also provided the link for that. She starts the talk by saying, when we stick pins in dolls, it's called voodoo. When we do it to babies, it's called child abuse. When we do it to prisoners, it's torture. But when we do it to patients, it's alternative medicine.
Huh, I like that.
And she makes a very strong point that we don't ever really need to debate these issues of whether or not alternative medicine works. Because she says, if it's proven to work, we don't call it alternative.
Yes, I love that old quote. I don't actually know if it's an old quote now that I mentioned it. We have a name for alternative medicine that actually works. It's called medicine.
Right. So she goes on to talk about how acupuncture is not a method, it's multiple methods, and it changes over time. So it was originally 365 points because it was symbolic of days in the year, and now it's over 2,000. And Korean acupuncture only has 300 points, and they're all in the hand. There's ear acupuncture that started with 30 points, and now they have like 130 or 140 or something. There's electro acupuncture. There's cupping over acupuncture points or at your tailor. And she actually jokes that when you add them all up, there's only one spot. There's never an acupuncture point in all of the traditions, and that's the penis.
Convenient. Also, while I approve, I think there's a lot of leather-clad dudes in San Francisco that are probably really disappointed to hear that.
That's not going to stop them.
That's true. That's true. It's acupuncture, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
Try it out. You might like it.
Now you just wait for the flow of my energy. Okay.
Here comes the chi.
Okay.
And explicit tag at iTunes.
Yeah, there we go. So she also gets into the meridians, which are supposed to be the pathways in which the energy flows or the chi flows through the body. And they've uncovered ancient documentation that says there are 9 meridians. Others say there are 11 that are also ancient documents. And some say there are 12. And some people believe there are 14 or even 20. And some say they're not necessary at all. No medical doctor, no biologist or anatomist have ever been able to locate meridians in the body. So from a physiological or biological position, the claims of acupuncture fail.
Yeah, come on, guys. At least get your imaginary meridians and pressure points standardized. But really, this sort of wild digression between practitioners, even in modern times. See, look, people go, well, science has different stuff. Yeah, but not currently, really. You see science improve over time. So if it's like, hey, originally we thought there were 9, then we discovered 11, then we discovered 12, then we discovered 14, then we discovered 20, everybody would go, there are 20. Nobody would go, actually, we're going to stick with the original 9. That's dogmatic.
No one's going, I don't think there's 206 bones in the human body. I'm going with 163.
Because those are the ones we identified in the year 900, right? So
right.
This sort of wild digression between practitioners is standard pseudoscience quackery. And this is precisely why this stuff is not science. It's not scientifically valid. There's no actual standard.
Right. And she also discusses the psychological implications as far as the suggestive nature of the acupuncturist. Like when you look at, positive results, or someone says, oh, it worked for me.
Mhm.
Well, a lot of times the patient wants to please the authority figure. And there's even shame and resentment from friends or family members if they were to reject or deny the acupuncture results, or even refuse to go to the treatment in the first place. One of the most amazing things she talks about is studies they've done with acupuncture on rubber arms. And I'm sure you've seen this experiment where they set up, and some illusionist or TV magicians will use this too, where they set up a rubber arm and then they put the participant's arm behind like a wall where they can't see it, and they put the rubber arm where their hand would be if both hands were laid out on the table. Have you seen this?
Yeah,
and they like
I have.
tickle it.
Yeah.
They like tickle it, and then they
hit it with a
poke it,
hammer or something.
and then they just slam it with the hammer, and the guy's like, ah! It freaks people out. They've actually done things like that.
They slam the rubber arm with the hammer, to be clear. They're not actually slamming the guy's arm, but the person will react as if it's their arm. That's what you mean.
Right. She talks about them doing this with acupuncture while imaging the brain. And when needles were inserted into the rubber arm, the brain responded as though it was happening to the person's actual arm, which means some of these reported feelings are happening due to visualization and suggestions from the acupuncturist, or visualizing the needle going into the skin, which means actually inserting it is meaningless.
Right. You don't have to hit the meridian if you get the same effect from inserting it into a rubber fake arm that you can get at a prop store. So
which makes it entirely meaningless.
Right. I'm glad you didn't say pointless, David.
I'm trying to be a better man.
Well, let's just hope that attitude sticks.
Okay, Jordan.
All right.
God, are we just going to start writing?
No, it's
jokes?
corny as hell, but I just didn't have anything. Yeah, I did. The Snapple, we open the top and it's a stupid kid pun.
Yeah. Okay, so look, the bottom line here is that there have been countless studies on acupuncture, even thousands. There is no real scientific proof that acupuncture works for anything other than slightly reducing your nausea or vomiting, and even that is probably strongly influenced by context and willpower and belief.
Placebo, yay, but with infections and collapsed lungs and punctured aortas, boo.
Okay, I want to leave you with one quick thing that I found in the comments of that QED video, and if you follow the links of the show notes and you go watch it, you should see this. I think it was one of the most popular comments. Someone left a comment there that said, I was an acupuncturist and I was continuing my education doing a BA in psychology. And in my research course on the first day, we talked about the qualities of pseudoscience. And I had an epiphany and walked out that day quite troubled because there were a number of qualities that I was personally guilty of. For example, when asked how acupuncture works, I would begin with, we don't know yet. Then I would follow with an explanation of one of a number of theories, depending on which one would make the most sense to that particular client based on their background, their education level, worldview, etc. So that, plus learning how to better critique publications in my psychology degree and seeing inconsistent results in my own practice and seeing hypocrisy in the field, led me to leave that career behind.
Huh. So at least one acupuncturist finally got the point. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, that's all I can handle.
All right. Thanks, David.
Thank you, man.
Thanks for checking out this entire episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show. If you're interested in exploring this topic further, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show podcast feed. There, we dive even deeper on this and many other topics. In the audio podcast, I also close open loops, cover things discussed off camera, off air, and give some parting lessons from our guest. You can find The Jordan Harbinger Show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any podcast app, or at jordanharbinger.com. And also, if you found this episode useful, please share it with those you care about. Last but not least, like, comment, and subscribe.